Welcome back. I am joined today by Jonathan Lea of the Jonathan Lea Network. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Really good to see you. And today we're going to talk about business law and the intersection between business law and politics, because Jonathan and I met through, it was a LinkedIn post that he put up around a Roll on Friday article that he had been discussed in. And I'm always really curious, particularly when it comes to lawyers that kind of speak their mind and are able to say things outside of that box of this is the way things ought to be. I'm always curious about that. I'm curious from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective. So I got in touch with Jonathan, and he and I have been speaking for a while now. Jonathan, why don't you give us a little bit of background to who you are, what you do, but also those kind of add-on pieces that have, over the last year, become a part of your role?
Sure, yeah. So, I own and run a firm of solicitors called the Jonathan Lea Network, so a slightly original name. Partly that relates to the fact that we're comprised of a retained team of employees in Haywards Heath, where we're based, mid-Sussex, and then we have a wider network of self-employed consultant solicitors who work alongside us invariably from their home offices in the UK or further afield in other countries as well. So yeah, I've kind of got somewhat of a background in politics and taking interest in current affairs. I did a politics degree, started studying economics and politics at Bristol University, but eventually graduated just a politics degree, and taken an interest over the years in what's going on and the agendas at play and the people behind those that get put up in front of us on the TVs, etc. And anyway, so I think that's sort of going forward to the present day. As soon as the whole coronavirus, COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call, started appearing in the press, kind of immediately smelt a stinking rat, and given all the usual suspects involved, and the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and Bill Gates and all the rest of it, and knowing a bit about those people and what's been attempted in the past relating to pandemics as well, and the role of the pharmaceutical companies and all of this, and I could kind of see where things were going. And so this every sort of turn of events of this narrative, as it were, I keep thinking, surely people aren't going to still go along with this. Surely this doesn't make sense or add up, and this all sounds increasingly ridiculous. But despite that happening and things getting even ongoing, getting increasingly crazier, people still dig in and will determine, for whatever reason I still quite can't make out, to follow the narrative and the programming, as it were, and do what we're kind of effectively told by those people at the BBC and in government who sort of blasted out the TVs and in the news at us all the time.
I was going to ask you, what do you think is going on? But I think you answered that in that last question, which is, I'm entirely confused, because I think that's often what most people say, is I'm not quite sure why there is so much compliance. But I want to know about you as an individual, because you started speaking out, and this got picked up for various things in I was going to say various different media, because I kind of make the assumption it wasn't just Roll on Friday. How did you feel about that? Have you always been somebody that was quite okay with personal, I'm going to say personal attacks, because I'm not sure it necessarily was an attack, but there was definitely an element of that. how did that affect
Yeah, I don't think I'm really affected by it that much. I don't think I sort of lost any sleep about it or was concerned in any way, which maybe is, why I've kind of been relatively also outspoken. Well, I don't really think so. I have been myself, but I've been relatively filtered, as it were. But yeah, compared to most other people, why that is, I don't quite know. I don't know. I kind of come from quite a large family. Parents divorced, was quite young, so I'm used to sort of people putting different spins on on things being interpreted in different ways. Yeah, again, most people in my family are sort of business owners, I think, so maybe they're used to a certain degree of independence. And I think, yeah, going to sort of boarding school as well, that maybe develops a bit of a harder. Yeah, you're used to getting all that kind of stuff thrown at you, and what you might call it, the banter or what have you, and being maybe more comfortable being an individual. Although some people it goes the other way. But yeah, doing a politics degree at university, and a lot of that was effectively studying propaganda techniques and looking at history with maybe a different perspective, particularly recent history. So you kind of know what to spot, as it were, regardless of whether it's the UK or another country. And then I remember there was before the sort of second Iraq war, there was an MTV debate which got a lot of press attention, where they selected 40 students, young people from 28 countries, I think it was, to, in inverted commas, grill Tony Blair, which was sort of a couple of weeks before it all kicked off, and was kind of like, in retrospect, kind of more used as part of the propaganda play to try and get more young people to go along with the agenda, as it were, to understand why this was a necessary event. Because at the time there was a lot of popular public resistance. There were sort of big demonstrations in London. But anyway, I had a bit of spare time at law school at the time, and this form got circulated around, and I filled it in, and then they selected me for one of the people to go on this show, and then I was selected as one of the people to ask one of the six lead questions.
Wow.
So yeah, that was sort of on not me, but there's a picture of Tony Blair with the MTV logo behind him on the front page of the Times the next day, and that was picked up with most mainstream media. And the question I asked at the time, that was back in 2003, was related to what became known as the dodgy dossier, and like why you were relying on a plagiarized 10-year-old PhD essay as part of your current, in inverted commas, evidence, as it were, for the renewed military campaign in Iraq. So I guess even back then I was finding
you've got an eye for it, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I guess I'm quite I guess it's kind of like an intellectual thing, I guess, and you want to. I like researching things. As a lawyer, that's kind of what your job is, to sort of dig into things, and you can always you're always representing one side of against another. So maybe that sort of comes more naturally to people with a legal background training. But anyway, I think then sort of maybe later on, I started a career at Clyde & Co, where again, that sort of maybe increases your working at a firm like that increases your what's the word, your cynicism, as it were. And part of the reason why I got that job, that training contract, was because I could talk to them about the experience on the MTV debate, and what led to me going on to that. And the person, one of the partners who's interviewing me, was the previous naval attaché to Russia, so had an experience in working in intelligence, as it were. So was I guess appreciative of my ability to sort of see through things. But then you're working at somewhere at Clyde & Co, and you're kind of like really quite on the inside, as it were. So we were at, one of the things I did there was like working for the government as our client on like the biggest ever class action that was ever bought in the UK, and you could see like the headlines in the press that were related to our case, which is the rail track case, which didn't really kind of match up to what I was kind of discovering, and then you see a bit what happens sort of in the background, as it were.
There's a wisdom in being in the inner circle, and yet you can see. I also worked for government years ago. I was working at a law firm, working for government, and it was a program which effectively was around identity cards, but it was for 2 years. And then there was one statement in Parliament that was made about this project that had cost millions a week for 18 months, and it was one statement made in government, and that made me go, oh wow, it gave me some perspective, because if something as big as that, with as many people as it did, got brushed under the carpet with one sentence, what else was possible? Yeah, propaganda is an interesting one, because
you have to have a thirst, I guess, to sort of find and research that information. It seems like a lot of people that they find that really uncomfortable, and even though you may come up with the most blindingly obvious sort of hole in the narrative or fact that doesn't add up, and people sort of dig their heels even more, and they don't want to know. It's too uncomfortable. They want to preserve this kind of like childhood naivety in some ways. Some people say that they and don't want to be responsible.
How do you get to the truth, or your truth, when there's so much misinformation, disinformation, that's not true, oh that person, that there's so many personalities attached to information, so many labels attached to things? How are you finding over this last year you've been looking for your evidence and your data?
I guess I've used social media a lot over the years, and I've been self-employed since 2013. So for a few years, between sort of 2013, 2017, I was mostly working from a home office, which and with sort of
like me today,
YouTube on in the background, or giving me more time to sort of maybe check things out on social media, what have you, that I wouldn't have otherwise done beforehand. But I think as quite an early adopter of Twitter, that even though I don't really use Twitter that much, it's a great way of finding incredible people all over the world and accessing their information and knowledge and seeing what they're sharing. So I've put a lot of effort over the years into curating who I follow on Twitter and what appears in that news feed. So I think that allows me to get some pretty high level views, intelligence that wouldn't be available to others, just from that one resource, and that's sort of 10 years in the making from my efforts and people I've discovered on the internet, etc. And then, I've used Facebook, although current 30-day suspension, and LinkedIn, used that, found all sorts of interesting people on that. Again, that's now restricted. I can't use that the second time. But now the last few months, all these other apps have come along, like Signal that we use for Lawyers for Liberty, and Telegram in particular, and that's like another opportunity to find and all sorts of interesting people and have interesting conversations with them and sharing all sorts of insightful information. Of course, you constantly have to analyze all of that, and there may be all sorts of things that you don't agree with, but the more there is and the more different views you get, and the more you're able to apply critical thinking to it, I guess, and then I think the better the chance you have of getting to what might be the truth, as it were, the objective truth.
At least a truth that's closer to the truth. It may not be the truth, but you definitely get to a truth that's closer.
What you may believe using your own critical thinking functions, rather than just sitting there and consuming whatever agenda-driven nonsense propaganda that's being shoved down your throat through the TV or the media, whether it's the Sun or the Guardian or whatever it might be. They all kind of link to the same people at the end of the day.
I love that you never mince your words. You're like, drivel. Drivel. Tell me how that's affected business, because you would think that in a business world, people, we like people that do a certain job in a certain way, right? Because we like consistency. We like how people. I like to know that my lawyer is like this. I like to know that the CEO is like this. And you're kind of a mishmash of the two. You're head of a firm. Tell me how this last year has been for business and how you speaking out has been for business.
Yeah, I guess I don't think it really sort of materially impacts business one way or the other. That's just me doing my thing, kind of outside work, as it were.
Right.
During the day, mostly 9 to 5, we're heads down, and we've got the successful, fast-growing, commercially business-focused law firm, as it were. So, yeah, I think we grew. Comparing the last quarter of last year to the first quarter, we grew, our turnover kind of tripled, I think. But then over the course of the year, I think it was a doubling in turnover. So we still had challenges and lost clients and work and all the rest of it. But largely, we kind of weathered that period well. And then we've continued to adapt and grow, develop this year as well. But yeah, so I can't think of any particular issue with clients. I'm sure there might be. I mean, we do. I know. The people who get very upset, or have done when I was on it and on LinkedIn, about me sharing views, even though they're just referencing things that are in the mainstream media and showing, oh, isn't this great? How like Texas has opened up and there's no cases and everyone's fine. For some reason, that sets people off. And there's one lawyer in particular who just all he does is just post like articles saying COVID deniers are crazy, kind of thing, and won't engage in any sort of rational analysis or reasonable exchange.
With me, Jonathan Lea.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's yeah. So I mean, we had a little bit of trouble with one, maybe I don't really want to talk about too much, but one employee in particular who thought it was very important that he should stay at home, and we've kind of like bucked the trend somewhat in that we've mostly all stayed in the office. So
has that been beneficial? Like, what have you gained, do you think, in staying in the office and kind of?
Yeah, so I think compared to other firms, like we didn't make any redundancies. Nobody went on furlough, no pay reductions, what have you. Everyone kept same salaries, which are quite pretty high for a firm like us. And then we paid bonuses at Christmas as well. Yeah, so what was the question again?
Do you think it's been beneficial to you? Not in
So there was a little period last year where everyone thought the world was going to end. Myself and one of the trainee solicitors here, we remained in the office throughout. But I remember when was it, end of March last year, and we literally thought the police were going to come and arrest us because we were staying in the office. So we wrote this letter to take with us where we were driving to work, to give all the legal reasons and analysis of why it was justified that we should be in the office. But anyway, now we've had time to consider the government guidelines or whatever it is. It's like, my view is like, well, no, we can't perform the roles unless we're in the office. So there's no reason to work from it. And I haven't really sort of pushed that. Most people just want to be in the office anyway, and we work a lot better where both seniors and juniors can more easily communicate and share information and ideas, rather than having that distance where you're reliant on playing email ping pong or trying to get people on the phone, which we do anyway because we work closely with our self-employed consultant solicitors. But that's different because they've made that choice and they're experienced solicitors. But at the same time, we're trying to more and more employ experienced solicitors ourselves rather than work with them on a self-employed basis, because then that allows us to bring in and take on more juniors and better grow our firm. But then you need everyone in the same environment, because it does work, but not nearly as well if everyone's trying to do work from a laptop in their bedrooms, kind of thing.
I'm curious, or the parents' bedrooms. I'm curious about what it was that made you make that leap. What was it in looking at people? Because I always say, I'm gonna ask the question after I've actually given a bit of an intro, because I often would go into, the city law firms and think, you've got to have something that you look up to and you think, oh, I really want that. Did you have that? Is that why you've set up on your own? Because you thought, well, I want what they've got, but I want to do it in my own way. Or was it something different? Or you said, I definitely don't want that. And what I want is this. Why did you set up on your own? And what business lessons have you learned that you could never have learned and didn't when you were working for
I better write down all these questions, although
I'll
I forget
ask you
them.
again. Let's start with, why did you set up on your own? Let's start with that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll write that down. Okay.
Business lessons.
And this next one is business lessons.
Business lessons. Yeah. Any business lessons there?
So why set up on my own? So, yeah, so I went through the usual struggle with anyone trying to get a training contract, and then was eventually absolutely delighted to get the one with Clyde & Co, which at the time I think had the highest number of applications to places, and it was a really good experience. Well, some of it not so good, but all part of a learning experience. But I think at being relatively naive, not having experience of being a big office environment beforehand, at the outset, all I could see is all like really incredible, exciting things about working at somewhere like Clyde & Co, the big city law firm, and opportunities overseas and all the rest of it. Then the reality set in of while the work maybe can be very interesting, it's more the it's quite an oppressive environment of working with such a large organization and hierarchy, and how progress is quite slow, and you get frustrated by not being able to make certain decisions yourself, or not often getting that kind of client handling experience as a fee earner. Although, for example, I did 6 months of my seat in Dubai, and that was a completely different experience, where even though they're a huge office over there, and they're really well run, you're kind of chucked in the deep end as a trainee solicitor when you go over there. Nice. And that was a really rewarding experience, and a really good office full of like a whole, great environment and atmosphere. But then it was run by someone different, I guess, than somebody who was more entrepreneurial, who'd sort of set up their own law firm beforehand in the Middle East before merging it with Clyde & Co. But yeah, otherwise, I then sort of appreciated that the more interesting people don't really tend to hang around in those big corporate environments that long. For whatever reason, they go off and do other things. So then after that initial kind of working that out, I then sort of had it more in mind, like, okay, yeah, one day I think I'll do my own thing. But then that's easier said than done. I think, I worked in Cornwall for a couple of years, where I had my own experience handling clients. So that gave me the confidence to do my own thing. But then when I did step out of that and look at setting up my own SRA regulated firm, I realized, oh my God, there's so much to this. This isn't straightforward, and it's going to be a huge effort to do this from scratch. And I don't think I can. I don't think I've got it in me to
do. You wanted to stay in law, right? So
yeah.
Experience.
So I did. So I did. I then after that, I went back and I got what I thought was the next best thing, like a role at a small law firm working for mostly Eastern European, Russian clients in respect of big yachts, super yacht deals and disputes, what have you. So again, really interesting environment. But I didn't, even though it was a small law firm, I didn't quite sort of get the experience I was looking for, and found it a little bit frustrating. So after a year of that, I thought, right, okay, that's it. Great small law firm like that. I've had a really good experience, but it hasn't worked out how I wanted it to be. This is it. No turning back. Let's do my own thing, and then start off doing the consultancy solicitor route. By that time, I'd looked into that quite a lot, and how to work under the umbrella of another law firm, but at the same time develop your own client base. And then did that very happily for a few years under the umbrella of another law firm, small law firm that's no longer, but that allowed me to develop my own client base. I built my own website at the outset. That meant that I always had much more work than I could ever do myself, which then at the outset led to the name, the Jonathan Lea Network, because at that time it was a network of law firms and all the lawyers that I would send all this work to. And then I probably did that slightly longer than I should have done, but because it was quite a nice lifestyle really, and you get paid well. if you do it well, as a self-employed consultant solicitor, and then finally took the steps setting up their own regulated firm, or before that employing people at late 2017, and then the regulated firm started in 2019. So that only then, when we got our own regulated firm, that sort of gave us the platform for future growth. So now hopefully we can keep going and keep growing nicely year on year. But yeah, why set up on my own? Well, why that? I think sort of, a whole load of reasons, but I think maybe more than others have wanted that sense of independence and being able to act on my own decisions and creativity. I could see a whole lot of things that for being done wrong or not so well at law firms, and those who rise to the top within large organizations are not necessarily the people who are the most capable or who are going to drive success in that organization. It's people who play the political game, and people who put up with the most rubbish, and people who just agree with those people above them. Even and so, I didn't want to. I found that really frustrating. That even going back to being a trainee solicitor at Clyde & Co, where this whole politics game, and didn't want to. Didn't want to have to do that any longer than I had to, kind of thing. So
how life reflects, like the smaller your work life can often reflect the bigger life, because you think, oh, actually those people at the top playing politics again, isn't it? It's kind of the way of the world, and it doesn't actually drive creativity or change or progress.
Well, I guess I had sort of maybe enough sort of confidence in my general skill set, not necessarily as a lawyer, but generally getting on with people and doing stuff and making things happen to think, okay, I can visualize this as being success going somewhere at some point, albeit there's all sorts of hurdles to get over and things that could go wrong through no fault of your own, but which who knows, they may do, but at the moment it's going well, and it gives me it makes it easier for me to have my own voice, as it were, in that I'm not answerable to anyone really at work, albeit there's a bunch of us who work together, and there's our client base and all the rest of it, but I kind of figure that you're never going to satisfy everyone. People are always going to disagree with you something. You're more likely to, by being authentic and speaking out, you're more likely to build connections and relationships with people and win work as a result, than you are just being anodyne and quiet and just repeating the BBC News kind of thing.
I actually heard somebody talking about this morning. My dad's speaking tomorrow, and he was saying, well, this is how I'm going to be thinking about my speech. And he said, you're never going to get to a place where what you're going to say is not going to be criticized. The important thing is
I think people are far too frightened of that. I think it's a mistake that people make.
Of saying what they really. I mean,
they feel comfortable. They kind of like don't want to be challenged, and
don't be wrong. I think a lot of the time.
I think the more you do it, the more you kind of enjoy it, and the more you're comfortable with it.
I think that's true.
I remember, like when I first started working for myself in 2000, I was in London at the time, and then I was quite involved in the whole Shoreditch London startup scene. Right. And there was a journalist called Milo Yiannopoulos, whatever his name is. I don't know if you've come across him before. No. He then since went to the States, and he's been banned on every mainstream social media platform, I think, but he has some kind of presence over there. Anyway, at the time he had this startup focused magazine website called The Kernel, which just did these outrageous kind of pieces on the various people involved in the Shoreditch tech startup scene, and really ruffling feathers and strong views and all the rest of it. But everyone, even though that people really disagreed, everyone loved it, and he got like a huge profile as a result. Even though people would kind of say, oh yeah, well, I don't really agree with it. I don't agree with everything he says, but they still read it every day, because because a lot of it is like really hitting the nail on the head and really truthful, and people are too scared to say that certain things.
That's the danger of what's happening at the moment, and it's taken me a while to kind of understand how. There's a sense I get, like, this is really dangerous, but to really then go, well, why is this really dangerous? And what I see is there's a lot of limitation on people's free speech. And whilst I don't actually agree with what some people are saying on free speech, what my danger is in being the person who's now, or at least I feel, that my speech is being impeded upon, or the truth that I know to be true is being impeded upon. The danger of that is that then you're in an echo chamber, and it's government created echo chamber. For me, that propaganda piece is really dangerous. And where that starts to happen is where you start shutting people down for saying certain things, and finding that line between what's appropriate. Just because I disagree with somebody, shutting them down doesn't. I understand now why that doesn't work, because actually what you do is you end up radicalizing people. You end up radicalizing them into their own views, and they'll be thinking, but this, so anyway, yes, free speech and the ability to say what's needed, because I can be highly entertained by people that I do not agree with what they're saying. There are plenty of people, I mean, in Lawyers for Liberty, I'm sure we don't all have the same political views. I'm absolutely certain of it. But that's not the point. When you've got a certain thread that brings people together, and it's a higher or a deeper philosophy, if you like. Didn't want to go into freedom of speech. I wanted to go on to business.
I think the thing that people have in common is that even though you may not agree with people's view, people are more appreciative of having that open discussion of all sorts of things. They're perfectly willing to consider all sorts of different views, and even though they may well not agree with that, they're very comfortable doing that. Other people not so much. So for example, like the main Facebook group in our area called Hayward Heath Gossip, which has sort of 20,000 members. If you go on there and say something that's slightly outside of what is deemed politically correct, then the moderators or the people who run it, you're banished for hate speech or whatever they want to call it. Basically, any conversations you see on there, any things people saying is like, oh well, it was great. I went for the vaccine the other day, and it was so efficient, and I got my stick, and all those kind of like I'm just using that. I'm using that as an example, but what people kind of feel comfortable share, and they all kind of like jump on and say the same things. So you just got a whole stream of comments. People say exactly the same thing as everyone. No one dares say anything different. And
we're saying something. I mean, that's definitely been my experience. Like, let's squeeze the appropriateness of conversation. I mean, I'm sure you've had it as well. Family members who are like, we don't talk about that anymore. We don't. That's not a topic of conversation anymore. It's so funny that it's happened on a global scale. Anyway, I want to ask you about business. So business
lessons. I wrote down your second
business question. Lessons. And the reason I ask, right, I have this philosophy that is like, there's business and then there's law. And then there's like, when I was in big law, I was saying things like, I'm really commercially minded because I can think through a problem and I can understand, and I know about businesses and I know how to write some board minutes. That makes me business minded. But actually the reality was I read the FT, therefore I didn't read it very often because, to be honest, it probably bored me to tears. But that's like how different I was. And then I went in-house and I became a bit more commercially, now I understand. I've got to take some risks. I've got to actually do some stuff that puts me on the line sometimes. That was what was interesting for that. And then I set up on my own as a consultant, and then it was setting up as a business. And I feel like that's kind of coming closer towards that business mindset. Have you felt the same in the bringing of the law and business together?
So I think since I moved to Cornwall and started working at a regional firm down there, which was, I think, 2009. From then on, all my clients were like owner-managed businesses, private companies, so entrepreneurs effectively, and you have to be a lot more, I guess, business-focused and practical, and understand what the issues are and how you can use the law to help them. So, as a firm, all our clients are still, we have some larger ones, but they're mostly owner-managed businesses and entrepreneur-led ones. So it's and a lot of startups as well. A lot are pretty cost sensitive, because at the end of the day, it's their business and their money. So you have to really get to make a lot of effort to get to the nub of the issue and really understand what their concerns are, and what they're trying to achieve, because they won't often tell you that, and you have to kind of particularly on the initial call with them, you have to really ask a lot of like probing questions and make sure you really understood the context and the business scenario, I guess, and then only then can you really be of any use in using your legal and practical knowledge, and applying that to their scenario and trying to assist them achieve a result, as it were. Yeah.
So you've learned, I mean, I feel the same. When you work with business owners, you come to understand, and you kind of cut through a lot of the noise, because you have to get, like you say, to the nub of it. Still got to do a lot of the work around it.
Yeah.
But you
just make sure you get off on the right foot, and you focus on the right points, as it were, rather than going off on tangents or spending loads of time doing stuff that really isn't helpful to anyone, which isn't always the case. But I remember at larger law firms, there's more scope to do that when you're working for maybe publicly listed companies where ultimately it's not their money, their company. It's they're just they're financed by the stock market, as it were, and they're these career directors who come in and do their thing, kind of thing. They don't really care that much whether how you rack up legal fees.
Did you ever do Bible cleaning when you were training, or as a paralegal at all? No.
No.
No, you look blank, but you get a Bible, when you get to the end of a transaction.
Oh, right, yeah, sure, yeah.
And then they would go through where you would photocopy it and have those black marks. On one of the firms, we used to go through in Tipex or white out on it.
Oh my God, yeah, never done that before.
Well, there you go. That is, even at the time I thought, well, this is a money earner, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you used to have the most perfectly whitened Bibles, but somebody somewhere has a number of Bibles that have been whitened by me, which was well worth.
Great, I'll bear that in mind for when we do them.
Yeah, make it perfect. Well, nowadays you don't need that, because you have most things which are electronically signed.
Yeah.
At least we do. What other things are you finding you're bringing into business, or you're bringing into the legal profession that you never had before until you set up on your own? What traits are you finding useful?
What traits?
Yeah, what trait? Which ones of your traits are you?
Yeah, so I sort of mentioned before, I had this sort of desire or ambition to sort of do my own thing, start my own. One, sort of to be self-employed and have that freelance lifestyle, and to make your own decisions, be independent, creative, all the rest of it. But then after that, to develop and grow something beyond that. I kind of put that more on hold, and I got comfortable working in my shorts and t-shirts at home, and having a nice, lean, profitable business, and not going that extra step and taking any more risks than that. And it was great, I guess. And a lot of people spend years and years and decades of having that experience. And the longer it went on, the more it's like, well, one day in the future I might take things to the next level. But for the moment, this is working out well. It's all good. So. But then eventually it got to the point where I developed the website, and it was just generating so many leads. I was just spending all my time during the day sending clients and work to other law firms, and not even having time to do any fee earning work to make any money myself. And then from the work I was sending to other law firms, I wasn't really getting, occasionally a 15% commission of what was billed. But then even if I did get paid that, I was sort of losing the client to them. So it was all counterproductive effort, as it were. It felt a bit like sort of going fishing, and then you get a big haul in and just chuck it all back in the sea, kind of thing. Which it was so I guess it was you get that buzz. It's kind of rewarding in that you're generating leads and all the rest of it, but not doing anything else. Not going any further. So eventually, I got an office and started to employ people, and then that allowed us to then grow and become a regulated firm, and then hopefully go on from here to be quite a sizable practice. But I guess as you go on, I think you need to, or you do become much more comfortable with risk, because it doesn't disappear. If anything, there's bigger and more risk all the time the more you grow, and and I think you get more comfortable with it, as it were. So when I was self-employed, it's like, oh, it's great, I can manage everything, I know what the figures are, and my bank account's looking healthy, there's no kind of risk here or anything, this is all good. Whereas now it's like, oh, all sorts of things going on, it's really difficult to keep on top of it all, and all sorts of problems, issues arising, but you still have to keep plowing ahead. And like, our next thing is to move into a much bigger office, again, kind of bucking the trend, as it were. So we're taking out an office space that's sort of 5 times the size of our current office space. That's going to be obviously a lot more money, and we have to spend money on developing, putting a kitchen in and stuff like that, and hopefully moving into that in September. But that's the only way. Well, not the only way, but the best way to grow, and is by having that combination of both, bringing on the juniors through the firm and having them work with seniors within that office environment, and particularly open plan. And if other firms continue to work from home, then great. I see that as a competitive advantage, in that I know full well there's no way they can do their job as well, as we can if we're more closely working together in an office environment. So yeah, that's kind of hanging over me, but I don't. Try not to think about it too much. But we're pretty profitable. We've had a good few months. So hopefully that will be all right.
I will continue. Long may that continue, Jonathan, because I think it's so great to watch. I mean, I know that you're off LinkedIn now, but I do love seeing that kind of enthusiasm. You've got an infectious enthusiasm that is, and for this stuff as well. You seem very grounded, but at the same time, you've got what works and what doesn't. I guess that comes from experience, but it also comes from taking those risks and then going, oh, well, this is positive. So I can't wait to see you guys grow even further. Particularly as I know how much you're taking on, and you walk your talk. That's the phrase I wanted to use. Like, you walk your talk. You're not just out there talking and saying a lot of stuff. You're a doer, and you get things done. I think the first time we met, and I was, oh, would somebody be able to look after them? You were like, yeah, I'll do it. And you're just like in it. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do that. I've got this banner for this. I'm doing it. I love lawyers like that, because that to me is infectious, and it kind of raises my game as well. I wanted to just final say, what's the big vision, and also how can people get in contact with you?
Big vision of continue growing our corporate commercial focused law firm, and we're adding more fee earners to the team, as well as support staff, both employed and self-employed. Keep growing. I think we say on the website that we're going to be, the next 10 years, if we follow the current trajectory, then we'll be UK top 100 law firm or something.
Oh, that's exciting.
That's the ambition. Hopefully we'll be there in 10 years if it all goes to plan. And then I like the idea, with Lawyers for Liberty, and generally getting involved with things that are relevant or current, as it were, with the whole COVID scenario. Then I'd like to be able to stick my neck out a bit here and there and get involved in a legal sense with some of these things that may arise from time to time, whether it's to do with this or whatever else it might be in the news in the future. So we're hiring a commercial civil litigation solicitor who's joining us on the 1st of June. So hopefully that will help us take on cases that relate to let's say sort of the economic restrictions and the imposition on our freedoms and things that we've seen over the last few months. year plus.
You're planning for next winter is what that's what I hear. You're planning for next winter, assuming that there may be. I mean, I'm sure it will never happen.
Yeah.
Sure, what we're being told is absolutely.
Well, hopefully, I've tried to get everyone on board, so hopefully we'll still remain in the office despite the government announcements about the mega double mutant Indian stroke Kent, whatever virus they're going to call it. And yeah.
Good.
Hopefully we can keep
for
going.
Everything you're doing, and that's in Lawyers for Liberty, but also just in the legal profession and being that voice, because I think there are many people who are out there who want to stick their necks out and feel like they can't for whatever reason, for being involved and employed in a certain way, or just for family members, etc. And I think it's great to have people that that I can also look up to and say, right, role model, there we go. If Jonathan can do it, you're going to go even further.
I mean, in the process of starting a personal blog again, which I had years ago, but then I stopped it when I sort of focused on the law content website.
The two go nicely together, though, don't they? There's a personal element to what we do. We have people like people, and that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that will work well. It did in the few months, a year that I ran it years back. So yeah, hopefully that will be up and running soon. But otherwise people can find me by searching online and my Twitter handle's there, and get in touch if you think we can help, or generally you'd like to connect.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for joining me today. I love it, and I will make a better effort of getting down to Hayward next time.
No, hopefully we can make it again next time.
We will
catch up in London.
It. I think we've got a London catch up, haven't we? Around the end of May. Anyway, thank you everybody that's watched, whether you're in legal or business. Get in contact with Jonathan on Twitter. Bring back Jonathan on LinkedIn. That can be on a campaign. Hashtag Jonathan Lea Network. And for those of you that are interested in hearing more about the law of business and the business of law, you can subscribe here. Otherwise, I thank you for listening to the end. I barely do in a YouTube video, frankly. I usually skip halfway through and go for 30 minutes. Or stick it on, and it just keeps repeating. So thank you for making it to the end, and we will see you again soon on the next video. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Joe.